evaluate the role of chromosomes and hormones in gender. So hello everyone, I am Kyla and I will be talking about the biological perspective of gender. This viewpoint supports the concept that gender identity and role are shaped by biological processes, in which gender differences are seen as resulting from sex differences. In other words, women and men act, think, and feel differently because of differences in how their brains work, and the way they think may result from chromosomal and hormonal differences. In short, gender identity and behavior are highly influenced by the two biological determinants, the chromosomes and the hormones. So let's first talk about the chromosomes. The chromosomes do not determine gender as this is socially determined. However, the chromosomes do determine biological sex. Women and men are chromosomally different, where women have two X chromosomes and men have X and Y chromosomes. In the period following conception, female and male embryos are indistinguishable apart from their chromosomes. However, the Y chromosomes in males starts to promote the production of testosterone and androgens, which are the male sex hormones. These androgens cause the male to develop testes and a penis instead of ovaries and a uterus. The androgens also cause the male brain to develop differently from the female. So moreover, men and women behave differently because of differences in brain development and differences in brain activity produced by testosterone in adulthood. In line with that, we also have the hormones, the second biological determinant. Women and men produce different sex hormones in varying quantities, and besides affecting the functioning of various bodily organs, these sex hormones appear to influence human behaviors. For example, testosterone. Man produces more testosterone, which has an impact on a range of behaviors, including some that are considered as typically male. Studies have indicated that violent offenders have higher testosterone levels rather than those non-violent offenders. And we also have oxytocin. Women have higher levels of oxytocin than men, and this has been linked by researchers to an increase of sociability, and it appears to affect the formation of bonds and attachment between people. So in short, most gender development comes about as a result of sex hormones. To sum it all up, chromosomes and hormones influence the development of sex characteristics in males and females. This biological view of gender may have a role in the realization of gender, their behaviors, and differences, but we must take into account that the environment and culture of an individual plays a significant influence in the formation of gender roles and behavior. So that's all for the biological perspective of gender. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so here is a checklist of our current activities. So we just finished the biological perspective of gender. Now we will go to the psychological perspective of gender, which is divided into three parts: psychodynamic, social learning, and cognitive development. And those three over there will report it. Let's begin with me. Okay, so psychodynamic theory of gender. Childhood experiences are the main focus of the psychological perspective. When you think of this, you must think of Sigmund Freud, that guy. Freud invented and he developed psychoanalysis, a method utilized for the analysis of psychic phenomena and emotional disorder treatment via unrestrained patient talk about their personal experience, most specifically their dreams and early childhood. Freud stated that the primary source of human behavior is the unconscious mind. So this could be what the Freudian slip. This also includes the iceberg theory. So the iceberg theory is what he used to describe the three layers of the mind: id, ego, and superego. Freud stated that what drives us is sex and aggression. And because of this, our first relationship is our mother, and our first relationship impacts how the infant will define their identity. So our first relationship is our mother because our mother, most of us or all of us came from her womb. Yeah. Internalization. The infant will develop a sense of gender identity and self by internalizing the people that surrounds them in their early years. Um, 0 to 4 years of age is where this happens, and the brain of the infant is and child is very, very absorbent to information around it, like a sponge. Identity is the dynamic in the early years of life. And but with that, that means it can essentially change. It continues to grow as a person lives. Okay, gender identity and roles are acquired during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. Freud had like a stage of development, and um, and the third, which is the phallic stage, is where we get our sexual development. The first two stage focus on the mouth and bowel and bladder control, while the third stage has a erogenous zone change into the genitals. This is where the changes between boys and girls happen. So first two stage is mouth and anal, so oral and anal. So that's why the erogenous zones is the bowel and bladder, mouth and bladder control. While in the third stage, since it reaches the genitals, that's where we change. Now, with this, psychodynamic theory of gender can tell us that your early years is foundational. So it has a very big impact on who you will become. But it's not the only impact. As according to them, it changes. So depending on what happens, you could potentially become into a different person than you were when you were starting out. So with this, mm, it could be seen in how people are raised different culturally. So, um, as a aspiring pharmacy student, one must be more mindful about people as they may react differently to how you interact with them based on how they were treated in their youth. But that's not a complete thing to keep in mind as they could potentially change depending on what happened to them, and which is why one must always be mindful and sensitive to an individual as we cannot comprehend who they truly are, but the best thing we can do is to be more sensitive and caring for them so that their experience when they come into the pharmacy is good and they will not be offended, which, depending on their threshold, maybe high or low, but still, we must always be be patient centered in it and always think about what's best for them. And on to the next reporter, social learning theory. That is all.
Social learning theory. Social learning theory states that the gender identity and role of a set of behaviors that are learned from the environment. This means that you have identified yourself through the identity, the ident- through your identity towards your environment. What you can see is what you do. This means that if your childhood has a healthy environment and good environment, then you will grow as a good person. And if your childhood has a horror and full of violence environment, that will mold you into a bad person, theoretically. This implies that as an adult or as a parent or as a guardian, you must do whatever it takes to make a good environment to your child or to your children or to the kids so that the kids, your children won't rebel and be a good citizen to the country. Also, having a good environment to the child will help him to grow to be a likable person by everyone in the future. So, as you can see in our illustration, since the person is in a bad environment, as you can see, parang puro violence yung nakikita natin. They tend to be aggressive to other person, which is bad to our society. So it is better to have a good environment for the kids so that they won't be the same person as this guy in our illustration. So mas better ang may good environment for the children so that they won't be a bad person in the future. So yun ang gina-imply ko. Next is the relationship of oneself towards the others. Previously, we talked about the environment. Now, we will talk about the proponents of what is inside that environment, which is the people surrounding you. Identifying yourself with the help of a role model, such as your parents, can greatly help the person to identify who he or she is. It's like a figurine. Without a molder, you cannot produce the same figurine with the same quality. But with a molder, you can produce the same figurine with the same quality, with even with different ingredients. What I mean is, if you make a figurine or a statue without a molder, uh, for example, ang ingredient mo is iron, then without a molder, you cannot replicate the same figurine, the same quality of the figurine. So if you make a figurine with molder with the same quality, with a molder with the same ingredients, it will be always the same. A good person will always be a good person and will produce a good genes to his children. So next will be, what I mean to this is that having a relationship with other people that surrounds you will help you to mold yourself into the person you want to be by differentiating the movements and actions of these people as your role models. So as you can see in the illustration, the person has many ties and bonds towards the people surrounding him. These people will help him to mold his identity. Family, friends, community, church, and school are the main institution that interact with you periodically. So this means that you are molded by these people na surrounding you. Last is the repetition of action reinforce the gender development. Now that you have the environment and role models to help you identify yourself, what you can do to help yourself is practice. By repeating the action, this will greatly help the child to enhance his or her ability to, to be who they really want to be. Take note that learning and applying the action to yourself is a continuous act throughout your life. Even though you already identify yourself as a man, that can be changed if you are influenced by other people. So if mayroon akong kakilala na friend ko na best friend or close friend ang tawag. Lalaki siya, straight siya nung naging friends kami. Pero right now is because more on photography siya, kanyang mga models is halos mga gays. So parang na-influence siya and now naging bisexual siya. So parang ganun ang gina-imply ko dito. Also, actions and learning that are taught in school can help you to identify yourself not just by your gender, but your identity itself and also your future. So, school helps you to identify yourself para mamold ka into a better person in the future. So, the last illustration is that the young lady is repeating her running action so that she can be a marathon runner in the future. So, as a pharmacist, we must practice dispensing, which is given to us by Doc Faller. And due to this, we were able to practice and experience through repetition of dispensing to other people and to exercising this exercise. And this help us to be a good pharmacist in the future. This will help us to be a good pharmacist in the future. In short, social learning theory starts with the environment, then the proponents of the environment to be a role model, which is yung mga persons na surrounding. And lastly, repetition of action that you have learned from these models. All of this will help you to identify yourself and reveal the entirety of your identity. And all of this is part of a cycle that will continue throughout your life. See you po. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Today I'm gonna talk about cognitive development theory of gender. So according to cognitive development theory by Kohlberg in 1966, gender identity is the fundamental organizer and regulator of gender learning in children. Children develop stereotypic beliefs of gender from what they see and hear around them. Once they reach gender constancy, they strongly value their gender identity and aim to behave in ways that are congruent with that conception. So, what is gender constancy? It is the belief that gender is fixed and irreversible. Most individuals attempt to behave in ways that are consistent with their self conception because cognitive consistency is gratifying. So, an example of this is when individuals think that, for instance, I am a boy, therefore I want to do boy things because the opportunity to earn acceptance for it is satisfying. So, from this viewpoint of children, they are intended to confirm their gender identity. Once children have gained knowledge of their own gender, their conduct and ideas can lead to gender constancy. According to Kohlberg, gender constancy is the understanding that one's sexuality is a permanent trait linked to underlying biological qualities that is unaffected by superficial characteristics such as hair length, clothing style, or preferred activities. So according to Slaby and Frey in 1975, there are 3 levels for the development of gender understanding that comprise gender constancy. So the 3 levels are gender identity, stability, and consistency. So first, gender identity is the ability to label oneself as a boy or girl and others as a boy, girl, man, or woman. Next is gender stability. On the other hand, this is the belief that gender remains stable over time, which means that one's sexuality is the same now as it was when an individual was a baby and will remain the same in adulthood. So the final component of gender constancy is gender consistency. It is developed at about 6 or 7 years old. This is the belief that gender is irreversible despite changes in appearance, dress, or activity. So despite the fact that Kohlberg's theory gained a lot of attention over the years, studies have failed to prove a link between children's attainment of gender constancy and their gender-related behavior. Children prefer to play with toys that are linked with their gender before they achieve gender constancy. Moreover, developing awareness of gender constancy does not increase children's preferences for some gender roles and activities. Also, the findings of other lines of research similarly fail to support the theory. Lastly, according to Thompson in 1975, 2-year-olds perform well in sorting pictures of feminine and masculine toys, articles of clothing, tools, and appliances in terms of their typical gender relatedness. So clearly, gender constancy is not necessary for gender development. That's all, thank you.
The sociology of gender is one of the largest subfields within sociology and features theory and research that critically interrogates the social construction of gender, how gender interacts with other social forces in the society, and how gender relates to social structure overall, including things like identity, social interaction, power and oppression, and the interaction of gender with other things like race, class, culture, religion, and sexuality, among others. To understand the sociology of gender, one must first understand how sociologists define gender and sex, though male and female and man and woman are often conflated in the English language. They actually refer to 2 different things, sex and gender. The former sex is understood by sociologists to be biological categorization based on reproductive organs. Most people fall into the categorized of male and female. However, some people are born with sex organs that do not clearly fit either the category, and they are known as intersex. Either way, sex is a biological classification based on the body parts. Gender, on the other hand, is a social classification based on one's identity, presentation of self, behavior, and interaction with others. Sociologists view gender as learned behavior, and culturally produced identity, and as such, it is a social category. Gender, like all social identities, is a social construct that becomes especially apparent when one compares how men and women behave across different cultures and how in some cultures and societies and other gender exists too with other people. Example, people think that drinking black coffee is manly, while ordering a latte is girly thing. Black coffee and latte has no gender. It is for everyone. The gendering of inanimate object is a super common practice, and it is a good example of how societies create markers of gender that has nothing to do with anything. Biological gender, as we recall, refers to the personal and social characteristic, but not the biological traits that we associate with different sexes. That's why sociologists say that gender is a social construct, something that we as a society create and enforce. Now the social construct may be totally made up by their effects on how we interact with each other. Indeed, gender influences how we organize all the society and how we distribute power.
My name is Farha A. Amiril and I am from BS Pharmacy 3C. Now we are going to talk about how women and men are made by society and culture and how they change depending on the society and the people in it. For a long time, men were able to hold power at all levels because they didn't have to take care of children or raise them, so they could be involved in social and political life. We are interested in gender and how it is learned, how it develops over time, and how it differs between and within cultures from a sociological perspective. Sociology is concerned with how human conduct is formed by participation in collective activities. A major component of the ordering of group life is gender, which is evident in a number of ways in which it is organized. It was during the 20th century that gender studies emerged as one of the most significant movements in sociology, and that legacy continues today. The research and theory involved with examining gender issues moved the sociology of gender from the periphery of the subject to become a prominent aspect of it. There is some degree of gendering in all social interactions as well as in the institutions in which those interactions take place. There are a wide range of qualities that people can exhibit independent of their biological gender, and this is the case with gender as well. Incorporating the idea of role into discussions about sex and gender only serves to further complicate matters. It's hard to tell what's being discussed when sex role is used to refer to both the culturally idea of role and the biological concept of sex. Social scientists use gender roles instead of sex roles in sociology today. Gender roles, then, are a society's expectations about how each sex should act and think. In this perspective, gender is seen as a societal phenomenon. For example, the statuses of male and female are routinely stereotyped according to traits assumed to be biologically based. Women are stereotyped as erratic and unreliable because of uncontrollable raging of hormones that fuel emotional outbursts. Assigning these negative stereotypes results in sexism, which is the belief that the status of female is inferior to the status of male. Males are not immune to negative consequences of sexism, but females are more likely to experience it. Compared to males, for example, female occupy statuses associated with less power, less prestige, and less pay in the workplace or no pay for work in the home at all. The sociological perspective, which holds that our social backgrounds have an impact on our attitudes, conduct, and life chances, is the center of sociological inquiry. When it comes to this, we are not just individuals, but rather social beings who are profoundly entwined with our communities. And that is happening in reality today.
Hello everyone. everyone. I am Ralph Ian Garvida, a third year pharmacy student in San Pedro College, Davao City, and I am going to talk about the perspective of gender in various cultures. Among all the theories of gender that you guys already know, I think the most common theory that can be seen in different cultures is the social learning theory. Living in a place where a lot of things are already set, from the things we do every single day to occasions we attend from time to time, gives us an idea on what to expect ourselves to do in a given place and time. Boys are expected to play with what society calls as masculine things like trucks or toy cars or baseball bats, while girls are expected to play with Barbies, dress up dolls, toy kitchenwares. We also associate colors with sex. Blue is for the boys while pink is for the girls. When we reach teenage years, we are also expected to do new set things while carrying the learnings from our childhood. Girls are expected to wear makeups, to have colored hairs, or to have gorgeous dresses, little to no body hair, have good hygiene, while boys are expected to play basketball, or play the guitar, or have a lot of girlfriends despite the fact that they have poor hygiene and poor academic record. These things are already engraved in our culture, and they affect the gender perception in our generation and the generations before us and the generations after. Culture is such a big part in the development of our identity because it affects the practices, the environment, our peers, our schools, and their curriculums, social media, religion, and even the career paths we'll take during college. The general idea here is that no matter what practices you have based on your location or your culture, the common denominator about different cultures around the world is that they affect everything I said before this. And it's alarming because the tendency with culture is that it's very hard to grow out of. I'm going to talk about my personal experiences with how culture affected my understanding and perception about identities and differences, and let's dive into the problems I have with it and the things we need to address its problems. I grew up in a very religious family. I was a very flamboyant kid, probably a little too effeminate for a boy. So my mom would always tell me, Kuya, remember ha na ang babae para sa lalaki, ang lalaki para sa babae. Which translates in English to a man is for a woman and a woman is for a man. And so what that statement did to me was suppress the feelings I had about my identity. It was one of the reasons why I had a hard time accepting who I was. It stopped me from understanding myself more because there was already a set of things that came with my genital. I was already fond of watching I was really fond of watching the Barbie franchise. I don't know if you guys know who Barbie is, but probably you do. So I was very fond of watching that franchise. Something about the creativity and the magic really enticed me when I was young, and I would watch them secretly in my neighbor's house. My neighbor was my cousin. So yeah, and it's sad to think about it because the perception of my parents was that I wanted to become Barbie. But the truth was I just wanted to see the creativity, the magic, and it just happened to be a Barbie movie. Um when I was in ninth grade, I met this boy who showed me affection. I wasn't really sure if it was a brotherly affection or more, but a lot of people have told me that it was more than the brotherly love. And so I didn't understand that affection that time because my perception about gender is that men are for women and women are for men. And so that seeing that boy only confused me further and probably started my identity crisis. I was 19 when I came out to my parents as gay. And the time between 19 and ninth grade was so hard because I knew that what I was feeling was wrong because I was told that it was wrong. And um, I became depressed and would think of ways to kill myself because I knew that I was wrong. And I was told that having affection for the same gender is wrong. Have you ever heard of the saying "pray the gay away"? That's what basically that's what I did, for the past for that 4 year span of time. Um, every single night, I remember myself crying because my perception of my identity was that I was an abomination. I was a thing that needs to be fixed. That I was a problem in the society. After my coming out moment, my parents and I didn't talk for almost 5 months. And that was hard for me because that was during the pandemic and I didn't have anyone to run to because my city that time was under ECQ. And so basically, we weren't allowed to go out of the house. And I couldn't go to my friend's house or to rant about it or to have someone hug me when I needed a hug. And so I faced all of those alone. The things that I told you about are products of culture and how it engraved harmful ideologies of gender into our system, into our own brains. And from the gender roles to the gender stereotypes and everything in between, culture is a very big part of one's development, and it should be up to us, the people who are aware of why culture holds a lot of harmful ideologies about different identities, to put a stop to it. A person shouldn't feel bad about being their authentic selves, because without our authenticity, are we really living our lives the happiest way? I hope every single one of you here will help contribute to the change our world badly needs. Things, colors, jobs, they don't have gender. Let people live their lives the way they want to, as long as they're not hurting anybody in the process. Let us also stop accepting differences, because accepting means there is something to there is something in need of accepting. There is something wrong that needs to be tolerated. Instead, um we should celebrate differences, because that's what we deserve and that's what our children deserve. And with that, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of it. Thank you and have a good day.